Hello, my name is Brett Formosa, and welcome to a Unity tutorial video series for beginners. For this video, I will go through each step with the mindset that all you've done is install Unity with no prior research or experience to make sure everyone can feel included and learn as we go. You can contact me either through the comment section down below, by visiting my personal website, or by leaving a message on my itch.io page. The links are in the description of this video. Last video, we made the obstacles or asteroids respawn when they hit the edge of the screen to make a simple wrapping around effect. In this video, we will do a similar thing, but with the player game object instead, as well as what would happen if the asteroids hit the player, causing it to respawn. Let's get started with part 5. The first thing we need to do, since we are going to be changing around the player game object, is re-enable it by clicking on the player game object, then click the checkbox at the top left of the inspector. Let's then change the size of the player game object to 0.5 on all axes for now to make it a fair size. Then let's move it down to the bottom center of the screen. Now, we need another script to control the player respawning. Let's call this new script player respawn. Let's delete the start and update functions, and let's write two references here. One of them will be a position for when the player hits an asteroid, and the other is when the player hits the top of the screen, which will result in the player scoring a point. For the first reference, let's write public transform collide respawn. And the second will be public transform goal respawn. Now, we will write an onCollisionEnter2D function like we did with the asteroids. Now, this is where things get slightly different. With the asteroids, we just have it when it hits anything, it respawns at its spawner. However, with the player, we need to differentiate when it hits the top of the screen versus when it hits an asteroid. One way to do this is with the usage of tags. Tags are used to differentiate game objects like a player, enemy, environment, or pretty much anything, and you can add whatever tags you want to add. Let's write an if statement similar to the asteroid when we wrote directions, but obviously changing it to fit the player respawning by getting hit by an asteroid, or by scoring a point by reaching the top of the screen. Let's write if collision.gameObject.tag equals, and then in quotations, asteroid, which means that if the collision happens with a game object with the asteroid tag, it will execute the code beneath. Then, inside the curly brackets, we will write transform.position equals collide respawn.position, which will move the position of the player object to the respawner. Then, we will write else if collision.gameObject.tag equals, and then in quotations, goal, which means that if it hits an object that isn't tag asteroid, but it's tagged goal, then it will perform the code beneath. Inside the curly brackets, we will then write transform.position equals goal respawn.position. Let's save it here and move back to the Unity editor to make sure everything works the way we want it to. Let's attach the script to the player game object if you haven't already. Similar to the asteroid spawners, we will create an empty game object, but we won't attach the player game object to this and the next empty game object. Just make sure it has the same transform as the player game object. We can do this by clicking on the player game object, right-click on the transform component, and go to Copy, then Component. Click on the empty game object now, and right-click on the transform component, then go to Paste, then click Component Values. Let's rename this empty game object to Collide Respawn. Let's duplicate this and move it below the camera's vision and rename this object to Goal Respawn. The next thing we need to do is add the goal colliders. Very similar to the left and right colliders, we need a top and bottom collider. So, to make it easier, let's duplicate either one and move it to the top of the screen and scale it to properly fit the entire top portion of the camera screen. But let's leave it slightly higher so it looks like the player game object is leaving the top and wrapping around to the bottom. Let's then rename this top collider Top Collider. Duplicate this collider and move the new collider to the bottom of the screen and name it Bottom Collider. Make sure as well, with the bottom collider, that we give room for the player's goal spawn to spawn the player without getting trapped inside or under the bottom collider. Next, for the top collider where it says Tag, we will click on that and then click on Add Tag. Next, click the plus and type Goal. You have now created the goal tag that we wrote in the script. Make sure it's spelled exactly the same way as the script, as it won't do anything if it isn't written the exact same way. For example, if you did write the wrong name, click on the tag, then click the minus button. You'll see it says removed in parentheses, which then will remove the tag. Click on the top collider and let's click the drop down where it says tag again, and then click on the newly created goal tag. Let's click on an asteroid and create the asteroid tag by doing the exact same thing as the top collider. Select all of the asteroids and then click tag and then click on the asteroid tag. Perfect. Now we are almost done. The last thing we need to do is fill the player respawn script references that are currently null. Click on the player, then drag the collide respawn game object to the collide respawn box, and then the goal respawn object to the goal respawn box. Now, let's hit play and see what happens when we hit an asteroid and then hit the top collider. You may have noticed an issue. The asteroids go right through, and the collider at the top of the screen isn't stopping the player game object. There is an issue with the game, and with this, I am going to issue a challenge. I'm going to end the video here so you can see how far you've come to fix this issue. Challenge 1 is the following. Make sure when the asteroids collide with the player respawns in one spawn, and then when the player hits the top of the screen, they wrap around to the bottom of the screen. As a hint, you won't need to add any new code, and everything can be done in the Player Game Objects Inspector. If this challenge is too easy for you, then I will issue a bonus challenge. When the first challenge is completed, you will notice the asteroids are also respawning. Let's not make this happen and only have it where the asteroid can hit the player game object without respawning, but still respawns when they hit the collider on the left or the right side of the screen. As a hint for this, we have done everything needed in this exact episode to complete this challenge. It will require additional code and additional tag or tags. Take a break here and complete those challenges. The answer will be in the next video. In the next video as well, we will tackle the scoring system for when the player hits the top of the screen. Take care, and I will see you in the next video.